Well, good morning, and it's a wonderful pleasure for me to welcome Rob Miles to the Pass the Baton series for the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning. My name is Jane Nodder, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at Lancaster University. And Rob is further down the track than me because he actually has his PhD and is now an alumni of Lancaster University. So we're going to have a bit of a chat today just about Rob's experience of the programme. But first of all, I'm just going to hand over to Rob and get him to give you a brief few words on his background and what he's up to, where he is in the world, etc. So Rob, thank you very much indeed for being willing to do this, and look forward to hearing from you. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Rob Miles, and I actually I passed my Viva last May and submitted everything a year ago in June, so it's kind of my anniversary, so this is extra nice to be able to sort of talk about it a bit. I mean, I'm essentially an English teacher. I've worked in the UK, in Italy, in Greece, in Spain, in Brazil, but for the last 17 years I've been based in the UAE, fairly close to Dubai. I have to tell people Dubai because they've heard of that, but I actually work in a place called Sharjah, and I live in a place called Ras Al Khaimah. We're like, the best way to describe us is sort of like an access course, a pre-sessional, to get students up to the correct level of English so they can enter into degree programs. It's always been a very sort of techie environment since I came, and that excited me. One of the reasons I took the job in the first place. You know, we've gone from iPads in the classrooms, to laptops, to, you know, using other mobile devices, and, you know, we've got very fast Wi-Fi, a fantastic IT department, learning management systems, etc., etc. It's a very technologically enhanced environment, shall we say.
Yeah, that sounds, I've heard this with other people, other colleagues I know who are working in the Middle East, who sort of say that it's way ahead of, you know, what we kind of have here in the UK in particular. Great. So how do you kind of use that kind of technology with your students?
Well, it's basically sort of, you know, accessing materials. I mean, this is perhaps the first thing, you know, everything's on a learning management system and everything is presented through that to the students. Right. And similarly, everything is sort of collected back through that. You know, we run all of our assessments online. Any work that the students do is submitted to us online through different platforms. You know, some people might use Teams, other people might use a Dropbox or something similar, but there's basically this sort of information transfer going between the two things. Yes, that's essentially that. It's kind of like it's their access to the material, their access to the course, their access to the assessment, and our way of getting that material back to us.
That sounds really streamlined. So what kind of age are the students that you work with?
17, 18, 19, school leavers, essentially.
Right. Okay, fantastic. So tell me a little bit about your PhD topic then. What did you actually explore in your research?
Well, the thing was, despite all of these very sort of high profile interventions, if you will, of technology that had really promised to sort of, you know, revolutionize teaching and learning, that didn't happen, or that hasn't happened, you know, and results were sort of staying fairly static at best and sometimes actually slipping back. So I carried out a change laboratory, which I know you're a participant in a change laboratory yourself. So the idea of that for the uninitiated is it's you take the participants and you do a bottom-up intervention. So in this case, I took a group of teachers and we identified the issues, and then we set about trying to make changes to it. And that was particularly sort of interesting for me because I've always been a big champion of sort of these technological interventions, you know. So it'll be me that's banging on your classroom door saying, come on, let's do this assessment online. Let's, you know, throw away your paper. Let's do this all paperless. So to actually step back and let somebody else have control of it was a very interesting experience for me, you know, professionally, personally, and intellectually, because it didn't come naturally. But the results of it, you know, we identified lots and lots of issues that, you know, the historical issues of these sudden technical interventions. You know, like in 2012, for example, in about April, we were told that in August we would be 100% iPads.
Right.
No paper. They even took away photocopiers on some of the campuses. And so we had, you know, 4 months essentially to get ready for this, you know, massive intervention. And that's tended to be the sort of the way it's gone. It's like, okay, next semester you're using laptops. Next semester you're using a learning management system. Next semester all assessments are online. So it's a very steep learning curve, which, you know, had created a lot of historically based issues that were manifesting currently. So we sort of managed to sort of collate these into sort of areas. So like issues with the devices, the tools in use, issues that were outside of that, you know, like issues with management, issues with the students themselves, issues with the wider community. So it was, if anyone out there is thinking of doing a change laboratory, it is a massive, massive amount of work for a single person.
It certainly is, for sure.
I'm sure you'd agree with me there. But at the same time, it's very rewarding. You know, I needed something that I could really get my teeth into, and something that would sort of really take over everything I was thinking about for that period of time. And it certainly succeeded.
Yeah, it's a very practical way of working, isn't it? It really brings things together. And I think, you know, you've got that group of participants that you can work with over a period of time to really try and make some sort of difference to the situation that you're actually working in, rather than being perhaps a bit more kind of theoretical or in your head with it all. So
yeah, again, I mean, that was something that appealed. I mean, there was a very strong theoretical framework. I like that, but that wasn't so important for the participants themselves, you know, and particularly as, you know, there's a lot of literature about how English teachers are generally a bit suspicious areas when you start talking to them about it. So it was, but we were able to sort of focus it on, you know, the very, very much on the practical. You know, that, okay, you know, mobile phones are a massive issue in classes. So how do we fix that? What do we do about it? And we've come up with some, you know, sort of interesting ways of using them as second devices, actually utilizing them rather than banning them, which doesn't work.
Yes, absolutely.
And
what if, have there been aspects of your work and your research, Rob, that you've managed to implement in your practice within the teaching now? Not you personally necessarily, but perhaps the other teachers who were involved as well.
I mean, the mobile phone one is a big one. We're pushing that. Also, sort of device deployment. What you've ended up with, because of, you know, devices, whether they're iPads, laptops, whatever, is if you've got a class of 20 people, that's 20 people sat staring at the screen and not interacting.
Yeah. So
we were also experimenting with, you know, sort of using different, you know, I call them constellations, you know, sort of like 4 people and 1 laptop, or 2 people, 1 laptop, 3 people, 1 laptop, to try to get a bit more communication and cooperation going on. Now, of course, COVID has scuppered that, because we've got very, very strict rules in the UAE on social distancing and mask wearing and what have you. But I'm hoping as it relaxes, if it relaxes, that this is something we'll be able to experiment with a bit more. Because that was also, I think, particularly for, you know, language teachers, where we're grown up, for want of a better expression, doing lots of pair work and group work and sort of communicative activities, getting them to practice the language. And then suddenly you've just got rows of students sat in front of laptops, not interacting.
Interesting. That's really interesting how that changes the sort of engagement with the whole sort of teaching setup. Yeah. Excellent. Sounds really, really good. So, you got the change laboratory done and everything. How did that, perhaps doing that work, change your perception of technology enhanced learning, or build on your previous thinking around technology enhanced learning? How do you see all that now, would you say?
Well, it was kind of, I mean, this is a big cliche, but it's all been, you know, the whole PhD thing has been a journey, you know, in the sense that I entered the course as, you know, a very firm advocate of classroom technology, to the point, you know, I would argue in favor of it. You know, I thought other people who weren't using it were Luddites and so forth. But I've become, over the course, I've become quite critical, which I think is much healthier. You know, so, so I mean, the change laboratory allowed me to give somebody else the control of how technology should be used, rather than me just being the loudest voice in the room, which I often was. And then And also, you know, to look at alternatives to it. You know, we suddenly realized that students really have fun if you shut the laptop and give them a piece of paper sometimes.
Of course.
Because the whole sort of device manifesto goes all the way down through K-12 in this country as well. So a lot of them have never, you know, maybe filled in a worksheet,
Okay.
you know, or something by hand. You know, I say never, or not recently. So that suddenly changes the dynamic. Whereas, you know, maybe 10 years ago, you'd take the students into a computer lab and play, you know, an online game, and they'll be, ooh, you know, whereas now it's almost gone the other way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So these students have grown up in that era. They don't really know anything particularly different.
No. So it's a novelty for them when we give them that. Something else I found, there's two things. It's kind of like, you call it application fatigue. When, I don't know if you must have heard of Cohort.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone. We were talking the other day, and it's almost like our teaching methodology, or some people's teaching methodology, is teaching by Kahoot and teaching by book widget. That's it. We do a Kahoot, we do a book widget. We do a Kahoot, we do a book widget. And it gets tiring for the students. It's the same thing. And also, I mean, another problem I've noticed, so I'm calling it the halas mentality. Halas in Arabic means finished. And you give the students like an interactive activity, and all they do is to just click as quickly as they can until everything turns green, and they go halas, and there hasn't actually been any learning taking place. You know, whereas what I've done, I've spent hours creating this fantastic interactive activity that has, you know, different multiple answers, possibilities, and looks fantastic. And, you know, when I show it in a management meeting, there'll be oohs and ahs. But when you actually use it in class, it can be quite ineffective.
Right.
You know, whereas if you go in and just give them a PDF, if you're going to be paperless, and say, why is that the answer?
Yeah.
That I'm finding, you know, this, and again, this has been a big shift in my thinking. You know, I used to do observations of other teachers, and I'd be saying to them, you know, why are you using a Word document? You know, there's lots of applications you could be using to make this more interactive. Whereas now, they're probably thinking, oh, it's him again. He's changed his mind. You know, and because it's almost like it's returning to sort of pedagogy in a way. It's returning to actually teaching and using this idea of the teacher as a more knowledgeable other, or putting them in pairs where a student can provide the scaffolding and be the more knowledgeable other. Because one student will have good grammar, one might have good vocabulary, one might be better at speaking. So together they can, as a group, it's stronger what you get from
build on each other. It's interesting you say that, because when I started out at teaching and learning online at master's level, we made all these whizzy like e-learning and tried to fit in more and more and more things. And over the years, we started that in 2012, so over the last 10 years, we've kind of gone back a little bit too in terms of the material that we provide to students and what we ask them to do with it. And the e-learning is a bit less WYSIWYG now and a bit more, you know, critical application of thinking to papers, to research, etc. So we've definitely changed and molded and melded a little bit more. So it's interesting to hear you've done similar work. And I think it is something about keeping going, isn't it? Keeping different approaches coming through. Great, thank you. So why did you decide to choose the program at Lancaster to do your PhD?
Well, a couple of obviously the technology aspect of it. You know, at the time I was still very, you know, gung-ho about technology. Also, I really liked the fact that it was modular and it was kind of lockstep. Like I had a colleague who was doing, I won't name the institution, but doing a doctorate at that and after each module, you have to physically go and register yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And if that had been me, I would still be talking about how well I did on module 1, and I would never have registered on module 2.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that you went from module to module, you kept going. I like that. I liked the sort of structure of the course. I mean, personal reasons as well. I visited Lancaster University a couple of times when I was at university in a different institution, but to play cricket, and I always thought it was quite a nice university. So I thought, you know, that's nothing to do with the course. That's all. Oh, they've got a residential. That was also something that was very attractive, you know?
Good, weren't they? Yeah, I enjoyed those as well. But like you, I think the modular structure really helps keep you on track, particularly in those early days. I also started a more traditional type PhD and found it really difficult to keep going with it with a full-time job and everything else, whereas the modules really, and having that cohort of people to work with,
Yeah.
I think.
The cohort as well, I mean, that was the sort of unexpected bonus of it. And I mean, something I really missed once I moved on to part 2.
Yeah.
You know, I am still in touch with some of the people, and I was lucky that I had a couple of cohort members actually in the same country. So we were able to meet and discuss.
Oh, that's good.
That was nice. But yeah, I mean, that aspect of it, and then I think I got a lot more out of it. If I'd come into it I did come into it with a very fixed idea.
Right.
But because of the modules, that idea mutated and changed and grew and became something completely different. Whereas, you know, if I'd just come in on a more sort of traditional thing, you'd have got a thesis about how wonderful technology is, and I've made all these interactive exercises and everybody loves them, right? Okay. You know, but instead I've come out with something that I wouldn't have recognized myself as being capable of producing or even believing in sort of, you know, 4 years later.
Yeah, interesting. I was kind of the other way. I had no idea what I was going to do. So, and then the modules helped me to work out something that.
Well, yeah, I think they do. They'll push you in a direction. I mean, you know, I would never have given that level of control to participants in any intervention I've run before. So that, you know, came purely out of, you know, a developing interest in activity theory and something I sort of played with during the modules. And the fact is, well, it was qualitative, a lot of the stuff we were doing. You know, here we get a lot of stuff in my current institution, in the region in general. You know, I've seen people just use numbers to tell you what they want you to believe.
Of course, yeah.
And, you know, there's very little voice given to stuff. You know, so it was from the very first, once I started my first sort of module, I wrote about the iPad experience, and which I'd been very instrumental in and very sort of at the forefront of. But then hearing what some of the teachers had gone through with it started to sort of open my eyes a bit, you know, because I was actually listening to them, not as a colleague, but as a researcher.
Yeah.
And so that meant, you know, I could, you know, see the trauma it had caused some of them, you know, and you know, this massive learning curve that was thrust at them overnight, and that took away a lot of your, you know, your sort of teaching powers almost. You know, because suddenly you've gone from being, you know, a knowledgeable, qualified professional to someone, you know, walking around with this iPad, not really knowing how to use it. So I think that the whole modular approach gave me time to develop, change, and, you know.
Great, thanks, Rob. That's really, really helpful and interesting. Quite a lot of commonality there, I must say, as well.
Yeah.
And I know you've been involved with a little bit with the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning. I'm aware that you had one of your papers published in the journal as well, the Centre's journal. Can you tell a little bit about what you've got from being part of that group?
It's, yeah, I mean, it's something I still think I'm a bit of a periphery member. You know, I was very lucky to get involved with the journal. We edited an issue on TEL in the MENA region. Yeah. And I had another paper for the theory issue. I mean, having that opportunity and sort of working with editors that you know personally has been really, really helpful, really interesting. And then, you know, now I've got my PhD out of the way, I feel I'm more able to attend the meetings, and I feel sort of a bit less of a fraud, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's that sort of, you know, am I really able to join in on this debate? It can be a little bit intimidating.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, I sort of think, oh, look, I'm just an English teacher, you know, at times, you know, I do a bit of TEFL. But then, you know, once you actually realize, no, I am part of this group. It is a community that's part of me. And it's, for me, it kind of represents how I see TEL, in the sense that TEL is a unifying idea, but at the same time, it's really diverse and really, really contextual. So, you know, you've got people who, I mean, you mentioned the online masters that you're running. That might be one type of sort of context. You've got the face-to-face context where I am, dealing with laptops in classrooms. You'll have other people who are, you know, perhaps edtech developers in institutions. So, and of course, from very different subjects, you know, from medicine to, we have, in my cohorts, one of my colleagues is a classical dance teacher. You know, this is, It's very, very varied, very contextual, but also there's this sort of web that holds us all together, and that's great because it gets me out of that thinking that I'm just a TEFL teacher.
Yeah,
The only thing I do is English in the Middle East. No, it opens up other sort of areas.
Yeah, I've certainly found that too. I get your point about feeling, am I a legit member here? But on the other hand, I think it's certainly helped me to make contact with people who are further down the track, or have done or working in different fields, and I found that really, really helpful. So and also a little community to be part of. So hopefully, that will continue to grow and develop. Now that, as you say, I think there does come a point where you just need to get the PhD done, and then you can sort of where you're going after that. Have you got any plans to do any more research at all?
Yeah, I mean, the thing, I mean, I again, something I discovered during the course was how much I really enjoyed doing research, and how much I enjoy the writing process and the analysis, and how much I actually hate literature review. But it's like, at the moment I'm trying to find someone to collaborate with, write literature reviews for me, so I can do the bits I really enjoy. But I've just I submitted a paper to the Studies in Technology Enhanced Learning that's pending for a later issue. I've just written a piece on how we do writing assessment here in our institution.
All right.
Because we use a thing called rash analysis, which is very complicated math that I don't understand. But basically, you take 2 markers for each script, and it balances them.
Right.
And creates a fair average grade by doing all this, very complicated maths that someone did try to explain to me, and I know it works, I just don't know how. But so I wrote a paper on that, again, utilizing activity theory. So that's under review at the moment. That then got me thinking about how we do speaking assessment as well. And I thought, well, there's another paper. And then I was thinking, and then I could pull this one out of the thesis. So I've got lots of ideas on the go.
Fantastic.
And I want to just keep, that I have really enjoyed, the researching, the writing. The feeling when you actually do get accepted as well is very nice.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, there's a converse to that as well. When you get someone rejects you quite savagely, that can be.
Or they send you back this great big pile of feedback, and it's like, oh, what? Okay. Well, good luck with that. I look forward to reading those. That sounds really, really interesting. It was very interesting, that edition on the Middle East with the articles. I enjoyed that one. So a couple of last questions as we kind of come to rolling up our discussions, Rob. Have you got any kind of advice that you might pass on to people interested in taking the PhD TEL program at Lancaster?
Yeah, I think you'll get over the imposter syndrome, and I think the cohort helps that. It's like the first module can be a bit of a nightmare. And trying to understand it and stuff, but you learn the language as you go along.
Yeah,
it's very well structured, so don't be intimidated. Don't feel that you can't do it, because you can. I think so. It's have that belief. I think on a personal level, make sure you've got the support of people around you, because that again is very important. So if you can find people, like I know one summer holiday I was actually banned from saying phenomenography, because I was working on something with that at the time. But again, my family's been very, very supportive, and that's been a big help. As I say, having colleagues who were local from the cohort that I could talk to was a big help.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah.
And I mean, even then the cohort in general, just on WhatsApp and things, being able to get that support. There's a lot of support. I think the program is well designed in creating that rapport between the members.
Yeah.
And again, on a practical level, I mean, make sure you can type, and make sure you know all of the little word tricks, like, adding page numbers, creating, adding captions, headings, all of these things. It makes a big difference.
Definitely.
When you have to edit, you've written 8,000 words and you've got to take out 3,000. You don't want to be worrying about, how do I create a table of content? How do I spell check this? And the last thing would be maybe get some reference software. I don't know if you're using any, but I use well-known one that starts with end and finishes in note. And again, I found that very useful, because I didn't have to think about, is it author, publisher, underline that. you know, that was a big help as well, to sort of just be able to.
You've done better than me there then.
In.
I started out with it, and I have to admit to having abandoned that and gone back to manual at the moment, for various reasons. Like the software was all updated and it was like so much work to get to grips with all the changes, and in the end I thought, you know what, this would just be quicker to do it manually. So but I think people have their preferences with those things. It's a bit like using some of the analysis tools like NVivo and these kind of things. Actually, do you know, I'd rather get my hands in the data and just really dig around with a pencil.
I mean, I'd agree with you there. I mean, I tried NVivo and things like that and couldn't really get anywhere with it. And what I find, you know, I'm highlighting things, you know, and putting
Me too.
I still use Word, and you know, I use Excel quite a lot.
Me too.
Because I can sort it. But yeah, but it's that sort of, you know, almost like cutting things out and sticking it back on.
For me, that's kind of, it takes me longer to learn how to do the software than it does to actually do the work. So I definitely like getting my hands dirty with a great big lever arch file, but I think that's just sometimes personal preference, and maybe slightly generational, perhaps.
But no, I think it's I think that again is probably good advice for people, is, you know, stick with what you're comfortable with. You know, try things out, because you might find you're an absolute whiz with something like NVivo or SPSS or something. But you know, don't be afraid to try something new. But it's a lot of work, so you've got to be comfortable with how you're doing it. You know, you've got to be able to achieve it in a way, as you said. If you're sat there thinking, oh, where do I click next? You know?
I mean, one of the things I found with running the Change Lab was that it was quite a challenge to find ways to collate the data from participants, particularly across breakout rooms within the lab sessions. And we tried lots of different techniques for that, because I didn't in my schedule have time to train the participants to use apps and things that might have made that easier. Whereas I know that other people who've done the Change Labs have actually used those apps more successfully than I did. So that was an interesting challenge. And I think going back, I probably would have invested a bit more time into training people to use ways of collecting data. We managed it, but we had quite a lot. We had to experiment with lots of different ways of doing it. So I think this technology can really enhance our research, our data collection, data analysis, but it's about having the time to engage in learning it, and also to teach others who are involved without taking too much participant time as well, ethically. So I mean, that's, again, that is a good point with the Change Laboratory. If anyone is thinking of doing one, it's a massive commitment on the part of the participants as well. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's not like a one-off interview. It's like you're looking at 7, 8, 9, possibly more sessions.
Yeah.
But they've got to make the time and coordinate that time with other people. And you
absolutely.
know,
Holding them together. That was, I mean, it worked, but it was quite a lot of work for them and a lot of work for you as a researcher. On the other hand, I think that group, certainly my group, they got a huge amount out of it, and they're still meeting and kind of working together on the topics, which is nice to know. So anyway, we're nearly at the end of our time. So as I say, this series is passing the baton. So I pass the baton on to you, or you very kindly volunteered to accept the baton. Have you got any thoughts on who type of person that you might pass the baton on to next, Rob?
I think I was thinking, you know, someone who's obviously outside of the MENA region. I mean, I could be really lazy and just go for one of my, you know, colleagues, friends, you know, here in the UAE. But you know, again, I'd like to sort of stretch it and perhaps show that diversity and that contextuality that, you know, that I was talking about earlier. So I don't know whether I'm going to go sort of back in cohorts or ahead.
Okay.
I'm kind of keen to go ahead, because the program seems to sort of change quite a lot, and I'd like to sort of see where it's going.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what I'm thinking at the moment. Someone who does something completely unrelated to what I do.
Yeah.
But at the same time is related because of the program and because of the interest in technology. So.
Okay, we'll have to see who we can manage to ferret out and get to volunteer. Okay, well, it's been really lovely to chat to you. I've learned quite a lot from our few minutes that we've spent together. Thank you again so much for volunteering to take part, and good luck with with everything that you go on to do, and look forward to seeing some more papers coming out. So thanks so much
Jane.
indeed,
Yeah,
Rob.
and I mean, thanks for agreeing to, you know, have the chat in the first place. You know, I wish you all the best of luck with your own project that's moving on. And I look forward to you telling us all about it at a CTEL meeting.
Okay, it's a total pleasure. Thanks very much, Rob. Great.
Thanks a lot.